Welcome to the Endurance Drive podcast. Our mission is to share the key principles that structure our approach to endurance training and coaching. I'm Katie.
And I'm Elena.
And Elena, I'm so excited to be sitting back down on the podcast with you. It has been a couple weeks. You've been all over the world. You've been traveling, and now we get to sit down and catch up.
Seriously, we've had some busy last few months, both of us, but I'm so excited to be here, especially because it is another emergency podcast episode. Ever since Katie put in the rule that we had to do an emergency episode when someone on our staff won a great big race, this is it. Katie just came off of winning the Summit Triathlon yesterday, and I'm just really excited. I can't wait to get into it because there's just so many insights to take from this. And yeah, I just want to dive right in with that. It's so exciting. Congrats, Katie.
Well, thank you so much. I am really excited. It was an awesome day. And this is actually us just catching up about the race live. So you don't know that much. Maybe you saw my notes, but you don't know too much about what happened. And it was really a wild day. So we're going to go into some of that. But actually, before we do that, I was thinking a little bit about whether we should do coaching and training insights. And I had taken some notes on something that I saw actually a few weeks ago. And I was thinking maybe we could start with that because I think it tees us up really nicely for a lot of themes that kind of weave into my race experience. So what I wanted to do was share some insights that I picked up from an Instagram post that was from this podcaster. She has a podcast called Allie on the Run, and I've listened to her podcast a couple times. She's really great. So she posted something on Instagram all about her interviews with people that had qualified for the Olympics for the US in track and field. And I feel like I just really resonated with so many of the points that she was making. And when I go through this list right now, I'm like, oh my gosh, everything here factored into my race. So I was thinking we could just start with that because I hope that other people can pick these things up. And my goal in talking about my own race is I want people to be able to take home things that are also useful for them. So I don't know, is that okay for you if we get started with this?
I love that. Yeah. And I think remember when we talked about this a couple weeks ago, and it's just, I really love it too. So let's just read that. I think it's really helpful for people to hear.
Yeah, so I'm going to paraphrase a little bit, but basically this Allie on the Run post said, I've been spending a lot of time lately having conversations with some of the best athletes in the country, and I've started noticing a few key themes and takeaways as I've gone to ask these Olympic trials competitors about their greatest successes, their disappointments, and their favorite pasta shapes. These bits have really, really resonated. So number one, she said, you absolutely have to believe you can do the thing. All of these athletes have put themselves in the mix and they have visualized and they believe they can win or make the team or make the final or run a personal best. Whatever that goal, you have to believe in yourself and believe that you can do it. And she said in parentheses, I believe in you. And I think this piece about belief, I don't think it works really well to go into a race and say like, this is going to suck. I'm not going to do well. And we'll go into this later, but I do feel like I started to get this little feeling of, oh, I might actually do well in this race the week leading up to it, which was a little scary, but also a little bit exciting.
Totally. Yeah. You have to have the mental fight primed, and that mental fight comes from that belief. So it's really impossible to imagine doing really well if you think you're not going to do very well, because then you won't have it there when you need to fight. So I love that one.
Sweet. Next one, she said, go for the win. Don't just try to make the team, try to win, because why not? And again, this isn't really the Olympics, but we could think about going into any race, like if it's winning your age group or if it's just passing the person who's near you. I feel like having that mindset is pretty helpful because it aligns pretty well with doing your very best and giving your best effort. So that was something that was in my mind as well.
Okay, I'll jump in with the third one. She says, focus on you, not on your competitors. Don't waste energy worrying about their training, their race plan, whether they are already have their spikes on or not. You control you.
That's so good. Yeah. And I will say the day before my race, I was kind of scoping out like, okay, there are some other fast women here and she has a disc wheel and those people look fast. But I just tried to say like, it doesn't matter. That's not relevant to you. And how other people perform doesn't actually dictate your performance. So that's definitely big. Fourth one here, so important. She said, control the controllables. This one always comes up. Control what you can, leave what you can't. I think this is so important in sport, but also just in life.
Totally. You got to minimize the worry where the worry is not needed. The fifth one is support is key. Wherever it comes from, every single athlete has come on the show and profusely praised their support squads. Not everyone has one. If you do in any form, you're super lucky. Lean into them, lean on them, let them love you. So big, especially coming from the ultra world. It's just really a team sport. We've talked about it before, and the crew is such a part of it. Lean on your community because you can't do it alone.
I love this. And actually, I'll get to talk a little bit about my crew experience because this triathlon that I did was kind of the first race that I've ever done that really had a crew element. And my crew was essential to making my race happen. So I did try to let them, it was Connor. I tried to let Connor really help me out. And that was awesome.
That's awesome.
This one here, I'm laughing at this one because it's going to come up in just a couple minutes. But number 6, have a plan, but don't panic if it doesn't play out exactly as you mapped out. Pivot, adjust, keep moving forward. This can happen at any point in any race. Unpredictable things happen, and I'll tell you a little bit about my unpredictable series of events in this race.
Oh, I'm eager to hear. Okay, and the 7th, stay present, anticipate the next move, but be where your feet are. I think that's just so big, and especially when you have a ton of miles to cover in these endurance races, you just got to stay where you are, focus on the next step, and just keep moving.
Love it. And then this last one here, she says, and the biggest one, the one I go back to often, you are still loved regardless of the outcome. And this one makes me a little emotional. Honestly, I think it's easy as athletes to maybe wrap up some of our sense of worth and our performances and everything, but just reminding yourself what the most important thing is. These races are not a referendum on us as a person. It's just about going out there and getting to do what you like. That hits home. So we'll definitely come back to this one.
Well, I love that we started with that. I see how all these themes could easily come out in the story that we're about to hear about your race, Katie. So I really just want to jump right in. I think maybe a great place to start, and maybe hitting on some of these themes from before, is we had talked actually amidst some of the chaos in both of our lives, maybe a few weeks ago now, about just feeling like you were in a bit of a funk and not feeling all that good and worried about how this race was going to go. And then this has just happened where you come off this winning race. So I'm just really curious to hear from you what that was all about, and then what changed in the time leading up to this race that got you in the right headspace.
Yeah, it's interesting because I took a ton of notes down at the time, because originally we were actually planning to do an episode, which we will still do, this is still on deck, but about like kind of weathering a funk and the ups and downs of training. And I was absolutely in a down in probably the 4 weeks out from race day up to 3 weeks out from race day, and a little bit before that as well. So maybe to give a little bit more context, this training block, I had a super solid April and May. I felt really good. And then June was a really busy time. I was on like 9 flights in a period of 3 weeks. I was traveling all around the country. I had graduations going on. I had family stuff going on, weddings, races, just a lot of stuff was happening. I ended up getting sick during that time too, which like GI stuff, you're never going to be on top of your fueling game as much as you want to. You're never going to be on top of your hydration game. And so I really just wasn't feeling super, super great. And then I think with that, as well as trying to keep the training high, I could feel myself getting a little bit mentally more down, kind of more anxious, a little bit of like brain fog situation. My sleep was going down, like just run down the list of all of the alarm bells. And my body was like, no, we're not super happy right now. And I think in concert with that, my workouts really started to feel worse, which in retrospect, that makes a ton of sense. You know, I really wasn't feeling super, super great. And there were a lot of good reasons why, but it was shaking my confidence because I was like, shoot, I don't feel the same fitness that I had in April and May. And I don't know that I want to go in and do something really, really hard. And I talked about this a couple weeks ago on the podcast, but I was starting to feel a lot of big fatigue too. So things like I felt like I had to nap a lot, or by like 8 o'clock at night, I was falling asleep, like so tired. And even if I got 8 hours of sleep, it just didn't feel like enough. I would wake up exhausted. And so maybe to just think about that for a sec, what's really challenging about feeling that way, you know, as an endurance athlete, it's really easy to gaslight yourself. So at first I'm like, well, it's just hot out. Like, it's probably just that it's hot. Or it's like, okay, I'm traveling. Maybe it's just that I'm traveling. And I think also thinking about the mental symptoms, I'm like, well, are the mental symptoms actually the cause of the physical symptoms, or the physical symptoms the cause of the mental symptoms?
The causal effect is so hard. Yeah.
So I was really gaslighting myself a lot. And the tricky thing is I didn't feel bad all the time. It wasn't like 100% of the time I felt terrible. I felt bad maybe 60% of the time. But then I'd have one rogue good workout and be like, okay, you're completely fine. Like, this is not a serious thing. But it actually probably was pretty serious given everything that was going on. And I think that led me to be like, okay, I need to investigate what's going on. And Elena, I actually took your advice. You've suggested this many times before, but I was like, I'm going to Quest Diagnostics to get some blood work.
Hell yeah. We love Quest.
And you've talked about iron, because I was like, oh, what if it's like an iron thing? So anyway, I got a bunch of blood work done. I also did end up checking in with my PCP, and I'm not going to go into all the details of what came out of that, but one thing that was flagged was pretty low ferritin. So that is related to iron deficiency. A couple other issues got flagged. And what's kind of scary about learning that 2 to 3 weeks out from your A race is that you can't just correct that in like a week. Ferritin stores take a really, really long time to rebuild. I think you said, it can take like 3 to 6 months to get back to baseline.
Yeah, several months just by supplementing. And even with some people, supplementing won't even work for them very well because they just can't absorb it in the right way. So it can be very challenging for several people. So yeah, I would also be very scared at that moment. So yeah, I remember us chatting at that time.
Yeah, and the challenge of like finding out information about your health is I think that actually made me a lot more aware of how fatigued I felt. And so I really began to kind of doubt my ability to execute on workouts. And if I started to feel a little tired, I was like, oh gosh, this is over. This is not going super great. And I was really feeling kind of the mental symptoms as well, a lot more acutely. And we know actually that low ferritin can kind of mess with you from a mood perspective. It sort of wreaks havoc on your body. So on the one hand, it was validating. So I was like, okay, this is a thing. But I still was really, really not feeling super good at the time.
Yeah, man. Okay. Really tough to be in that situation. I remember hitting on that being like, hey, what do you want to do about the race? Because you just found out about this thing, and it could mean that you just don't do the race, but it could also mean, okay, I feel validated and I'm just going to take pressure off. Where did you go from that moment? Because now you're 2 weeks out from the race. What do you got? What are you going to do?
Well, so it's interesting that you mentioned this point about like trying to take the pressure off, because I think actually even separate from the health stuff going on, I had been feeling an increasing amount of pressure to perform at this race. And like, I love this podcast. We talk about this podcast a lot, but it puts a little bit more of a spotlight on like me and my training and my life. And so that was a source of pressure. And actually, I have joked on this podcast extensively, especially with Jim, about the Cohasset Sprint Triathlon that I did a couple months ago, I guess about a month ago now. But honestly, that was a pretty tough experience mindset-wise, because many people asked me right before, like, hey, are you going to win? And in my head, I was like, no, probably not. It's a pretty competitive sprint. I don't race sprints, but all of that really made me feel like I am not enjoying this anymore, because I feel like if I don't win, it's going to be a letdown or just some type of bad feeling. And I did not win the Cohasset Tri, which we all know based on how much we've joked about on this podcast. But in general, I think I was just not in the right headspace at all. And I think I told myself the only way that I can toe the line at Sea to Summit is if I figure out how to actually take the pressure off the result. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, all right, I'm going to come up with a list of a bunch of things that I can do to at least try to take the pressure off. And then I'll evaluate whether any of that actually helps the situation, and then make a decision maybe right before about whether I'm actually going to race.
Okay, whoa. I love how methodical that is. Like, look, actually make a list of like, what are the things I can do to control the controllables of taking pressure off. So now I'm curious, like, what was on your list? What did you do?
Yeah. Okay. So first one, this is big for me. I love Strava. We know I love Strava, but I quit Strava for 2 weeks actually. So 2 weeks out from my race, I was still uploading stuff sort of privately, but I was not on Strava at all. I put a bunch of really strict timers on all my other social media. So I really just wasn't on my phone very much, no more than like 5 minutes a day for any type of social media stuff. I started taking a lot more rest days. So in the 2 weeks leading up to a race, I would be tapering, but I was taking more like no activity type rest stuff and really focusing on everything I could do for self-care. When I did train at the suggestion of my coach, I was using a lot less data. So I was doing runs and rides and swims by feel. I wasn't really looking at my watch, just seeing like, okay, really, how do I feel here? I was also jotting down notes every day for 2 weeks about, do I want to do the race? Do I not want to do the race? Because it's really easy to have a super powerful feeling of like, I'm not doing it because I had one bad swim. Yeah. But I was like, I need to look at the trends. Like overall, is this an 80-20 I'm going to do it? Is it a 50-50? Where are we landing? And then this was a big one. I also stopped talking about the race to absolutely anyone outside of what I'm calling my performance bubble, which was a teeny tiny group of people that all were trying to help me kind of make the right decision and just the decision that I needed. So Connor, my coach, my therapist, a very small group of friends and family. And I was just kind of dodging it anytime anyone else asked me about the race. So if I was like vague with anyone, I apologize. I was like, I just need to not discuss this at all with anyone. And what was great about that bubble was I knew that everybody in there did not care if I did the race or not, did not care if I won or not, but just wanted to support me as a person. And I think that was actually the most helpful thing that I needed for deciding whether to do it.
Oh, that's really sweet. And I love the term performance bubble. I gotta build who is my performance bubble. That's really cool.
And I think everyone should have a performance bubble, right? It could be anyone, but I think that's really, really meaningful just to kind of know that these race results don't define us. These people in the bubble really, really matter.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, well, it sounds like then from taking those steps, you were able to mentally compartmentalize and be able to take the pressure off. But I'm just curious what that felt like. You started this 2 weeks out. So what was that transition like leading up to the race then?
Yeah, so I think I started to feel a little bit different as soon as I was like taking the step back from Strava, as soon as I was not really talking about the race. And I would say a really pivotal moment was I watched Ironman Lake Placid as a coach 1 week out from my race day. And it was an awesome experience. I love Lake Placid and I really enjoyed being there. And I started to get that energy of like, oh, racing actually can be fun. It's something cool. Whereas previously I was like, racing is truly the worst thing in the entire world. Why would anyone ever do it? it's so terrible. This is awful. So I was on the course and I don't know, I really like, it was this internal kind of, I'll call it like a golden sparkly feeling of like, ooh, like I'm a little bit excited for my race day. And I think I started kind of using a little bit more data again to just see where I was. And I had a series of 3 workouts. They were all short, but they were all like a really good swim, a really good bike, and a really good run. And I hadn't felt that way in a really long time. But I think it reminded me like, okay, somewhere you still do have this fitness. You might have some health stuff going on. Maybe your performance is not perfect right now, but you are capable of these watts or this heart rate or this speed or whatever it is. And so I think that was really, really important for me. And to see that happen and be like, and also I'm not going to put it on Strava. Like that kind of felt good to say, like before I was hiding it because I felt like shit. But now it's like I had something that felt super awesome and badass. And I don't need any validation for it because I just know it was something that I'm really proud of.
Yeah. It's like the internal feeling that, okay, I've got it. I love when that clicks. Yeah.
Yeah. And it happened really just in the nick of time. And I started to also have the feeling of, oh, wow, maybe I actually do have a shot at doing well at this race. And honestly, that was a little bit of a scary thought. And I tried not to focus on it too much. But we were talking earlier about belief. And I think the self-belief was kind of creeping in. I was like, okay, maybe I've got this. Mm-hmm. And so about a week out, right after like Placid, I decided like, okay, I'm going to go for this. I'm going to give it my best effort. I'm going to do everything I can this week. I'm going to taper. I'm going to sleep. I'm going to like be in Normatec boots every single day, all of that. And I'm going to toe the line.
Oh, amazing. I'm just like inspired, feeling the vibes. You're going for the race. I mean, actually, I kind of want to brag about it for a second because this race is it's a very cool race. You get to cover some cool ground. You start in Maine, then you bike, 95 miles, right?
Well, we'll get back to that. It's 91, but I bike 95. So that's...
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, yeah, you swim first, then you bike 91/95 miles, and then you get to run up Mount Washington, which is just such a cool feature in New England. And also, correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't there like you have to be a very legitimate triathlete to even be in this race in the first place?
Yeah, so it's pretty cool. There's some pretty strict guidelines on registering where you have to have posted a certain time in an Ironman or a 70.3 in order to sign up. So they want to know that you're an experienced triathlete. There's no one who's doing their first triathlon at Sea to Summit. Everyone here is pretty experienced. And I could tell at check-in, like every single person is wearing like some Ironman hat or Ironman shirt. And I'm like, okay, this is definitely an experienced field, even though it's a smaller field.
Okay, super cool. Yeah, so just very cool you're in this field and that you win this race, but just maybe take us to race day and what Sea to Summit entails for you, what it is, and then how you went into that race day.
Yeah, so you're spot on with, yes, you start this swim very close to the sea. That's why it's called sea, although they've had some issues with getting like permits or safety to actually do it in the ocean. So you're in this little pond in South Berwick, Maine that's like very close to the sea. So that's the sea part of Sea to Summit.
Got it.
But you swim there about 1.2 miles, which is like a half Ironman swim. And then you ride your bike from there to Wildcat Ski Mountain, which is right next to the base of Mount Washington. And that, if you go the most direct route, is 91 miles, and you have to self-navigate. So you can kind of take whatever route you want, but they have a most common route that the majority of racers take. I will get to the reason that I biked extra in a little while. And then, yeah, from there, the run up to the top of Mount Washington, it's about 5 miles. You have a little bit on the road coming out of Wildcat, and then the rest is straight up Tuckerman Ravine Trail. And so you're gaining about 4,200 vertical feet in 5 miles, which is extremely steep. And ultimately, this is more of like a running into power hiking, into hand over foot climbing and bouldering to get to the top of Mount Washington. It's kind of a scramble, and you end right at the summit. And one other thing I'll share that's really interesting about this race is most triathlons, you can't get any type of outside support. So you're relying on aid stations. For example, you get your flat coat, a volunteer gives it to you. But in this race, there are no aid stations at all. And instead, each racer has to have a designated porter, they call it. And so the porter's job is to kind of crew for the athlete the entire day, which this actually sounds a lot like the ultra world with how the crew operates.
No, it's super cool. I love it. It's like a little merge of worlds right there. Yeah.
Yeah. And so basically, Connor, my husband, was my porter, and his job was to be there at the beginning. After I finished the swim, he was going to take my wetsuit, take my goggles and cap, throw him into our car, drive the bike course and sort of leapfrog around me and be there to help me in case I got a mechanical or when I wanted to exchange water bottles or get more food. He was there the whole bike. Then he had to drive to Wildcat Ski Mountain and have my Transition 2 set up with my run stuff, my trail running vest, all my gear. And then he'd help me transition. He would drive to the top of Mount Washington and meet me there to drive me down. So he had a busy, busy day. And I would say in this race, the role of the porter is so essential that number one, you're not allowed to race without it. But number two, I would not have won this race without having a porter like Connor. He absolutely crushed it. So it was cool to do it together.
Yeah, I kind of want to like double click on that because you're a triathlete. Like, have you had a crew experience before? Is this the first time you've had that?
No, yeah, this is truly the first time I've ever had it. And I would say my only experience with crewing in general was I crewed for Jim at this race in 2018. So I had been a porter and it was pretty crazy to go full circle. And if you want some history, go on the Sea to Summit website and scroll down to the first page and you'll see a picture of Jim and me on top of the mountain.
I did just see that. Yeah.
So that is some old lore for us. But yeah, otherwise, I've never really had any type of crew experience. And it was really cool because Connor has always been such an amazing supporter of all my races, but usually it's just kind of spectator squad, which super important, but he's not doing anything to get me across the line. And here he was making it possible for me to get across the line for literally the entire day.
Oh, so cool. I'm so glad you guys got to have that experience. I find it to be very powerful. So that's awesome. Okay, great. So this makes sense. This race is like a triathlon kind of on steroids in a cool, adventurous way. Can you walk us through like just the race now? I'm just so curious to hear your mental state, your physical state, what you were thinking to yourself, etc.
Totally. Yeah. So race morning, I felt good. I had been a little bit nervous the day before because at check-in, I was seeing everyone. And that was like me stepping outside of my performance bubble for the first time in 2 weeks. I'd been living in this hole where I was like, don't talk to anyone, don't communicate with anyone. And then I saw all the other racers and I was like, okay, there are definitely some fast people here. But I did feel good on race morning. The race starts crazy early, so 5:30 in the morning. And so I was up at 3, but overall feeling pretty good. And what was funny was I was lining up to start. And I actually talked about this on a podcast 1 or 2 weeks ago with Jim. But I think something that can really help enhance performance is the ability to just stay kind of happy or stay in a positive mindset while you're racing. And I had told Connor this. I don't know if he did this on purpose or he was just kind of being himself, but he was making me laugh so hard right before the gun went off. And this was huge because it did really like kind of carry me the whole day. In this swim, we're doing the swim and there was a huge hill to get back up to T1. And he just turned to me and he said, Katie, I'm going to roll down the hill while you're doing your swim just to entertain myself. And I had this image of Connor, like he wasn't actually going to do it, but just Connor like rolling down the hill, just being totally ridiculous. And then anytime I was having a tough time during the bike, I was just like, imagine Connor rolling down the hill during my swim. And I was like, this is really funny. So yeah, the point is find something that makes you smile no matter what. And you can pull that out later. But yeah, I was really calm, got in the swim. The nice thing about this race is the field's capped at I think 150 and maybe 135 people started. So the swim actually was pretty calm. I don't think I've ever had the calm triathlon swim before because it's always super chaotic. So I felt really good, had a solid swim, had a fast transition 1. And then this is where things went a little bit haywire. So I had my Garmin bike computer that was directing me the correct way, came out of T1, took a left turn, started hammering. I'm like, I feel so good. I think I'm ahead of people. I had a better swing than I was expecting. And then I was biking along and I was like, I don't see anybody else. Like, I don't see a single other racer. And my swim might have been fine, but it was not so good that I would have beat everyone else. Like, I was thinking I was just in the middle of the pack or something. I didn't see any porters in their cars, no racers, no nothing. And my Garmin bike computer was kind of confused. It was taking me on these different roads. And I just had this gut feeling like something is not right now. And I kept going. I kept trying to follow the Garmin and I was going for maybe 10 minutes. And then I saw a highway sign and it was Route 236 South. And I was like, I don't know a lot, but I know that south is not the direction to Mount Washington. Like that cannot be right. I know that I need to be going north. And so I was like, I am definitely lost. This is not right. And so I ended up actually getting off my bike. I pulled out my phone, which I had in case I needed anything from Connor. And I called him. I was like, I have no idea where I am right now. And he's trying to use Find My Friends to see my location, but the service wasn't good. I had no idea where I was supposed to go. And so I'm really like starting to freak out. And in that moment, I also was like, okay, well, if you had any aspirations about podium or winning, that's not going to happen. You are losing so much time right now. And so I basically took a deep breath and I was like, all right, whatever. We are going to retrace our steps and try to get back on course. I'm still kind of freaking out. I'm holding my phone in one hand. It's on speaker. I'm biking on my TT bike, like not a great situation. Retracing my steps up a big hill. I go back to close to the beginning. And then I saw actually one single porter car. And you could identify them because they'd written numbers. Everyone's race number was written on their car. And this guy rolls down the window, and funny story, want to shout out to this driver, Mike, who actually is a podcast listener and a friend of our physical therapist, Neil McKenzie. So shout out to Mike. He's like, hey, I think you have to go this way. And he pointed me to the right. And it turned out that that street was not the official course that I'd marked out or the unofficial course that I was planning for, but it would take me to get back on course. So I was like, all right, we're going that way. I hopped on the road. It was a lot hillier than it should have been. So that was kind of a bummer to be like, okay, here's extra elevation right away. But I did eventually find the course again and I saw a couple other bikers and I was like, okay, we are back on course. Let's keep riding.
Whoa, okay. We gotta pause and recap that a bit. Because first off, what a beast to win this race after being lost for 20 minutes. But just the mental side of it too. So you said that you were kind of letting go of those expectations. Had you already let go of the expectations, or did you have to kind of like redo that again in that moment and then just like, okay, I'm just going to ride for fun? What exactly was that mental process like, and what helped you do that?
Yeah, so I think I had done a pretty good job of getting to the starting line and saying, okay, this race, it doesn't matter if I win or not. I'm here to have fun, whatever. But then in the days leading up to it, when I started to feel good, I was like, oh, but maybe I could end up on the podium, or maybe I could kind of win. So it was sort of in the back of my mind. Maybe I would call it like a lingering expectation. But then as soon as that happened, as I was literally standing 1 foot down on the ground on the phone with Connor, like, I don't know where I am, all of that completely melted away. And I was like, all right, I have a choice right now. I can either quit and Connor can come get me and we can drive back to Boston at 6 a.m. because I'm annoyed and I'm not going to win. Or I can just, I'm tapered, I'm rested, I feel okay. So I could just, test my fitness and give my best effort and have a fun adventure day, getting to ride my bike for a while and run out Mount Washington, which is something that I really like to do regardless of the outcome. And so I said, okay, I think I want to do the latter. And in my head, I was like, well, if I wanted to, I could just look at my overall time and subtract 20 minutes in my head and then tell myself where I would have been. Like, that'd be fine too. And I'm playing these different mental games. But yeah, I mean, I think something I'm really proud of with this race is in that moment, I was like, okay, this sucks, but thinking about it is not going to help me. Like, it happened. This is the reality. We need to move forward and make the right decisions right now. So I was really trying hard to just not dwell on the past, not get upset about it, and just pivot and nail what I could control at that point, which was getting back on course, fueling, hydration, pacing, and mindset. And so that was kind of what I did from that point.
Yeah, no, it's like practicing the stuff that we started the podcast with, the controllables, have a bit of a goldfish brain of just staying present and doing the thing. And also like the adventure mindset too. Like, I mean, this course is so cool. You could have just planned it as being a dope adventure day one of these days. Like, what would be a fun thing to do is bike to Mount Washington and run up it. And then you still get to go do it and just have a good day. So that's really cool that you were able to do that. Okay, so we're locked back in. We've lost 20 minutes, but we can subtract that later. And now how does it go? You start biking, right?
Yeah, so I finally started to see some more racers. I was like, okay, thank God, I am back on course. This is a good thing. But at that point, I also realized how far back I was. And I'm not going to say that you can tell everything about someone's ability based on the bike that they have, but I was at the back of the pack with people on like a 1990 road bike with like a drawstring backpack, who I guess that they've had a fast Ironman or 70.3 to get there. But I was like, okay, this is not the front of the field. Like, we might actually be in last place right now. But I was like, all right, well, this is good because now I have a lot of people to chase. And I told myself I am not going to get passed by a single person on the bike. And so I made it my goal to just steadily work my way up the field and catch each person and catch this person, then that person. And there were a lot of people to pass, but there weren't that many people in the race altogether. So it wasn't like that congested. And I really was able to just lock eyes on the next person, go get them, pass them, and then keep going.
What a killer mindset.
And it was good. I mean, I felt like I actually had a little jolt of energy every time I passed someone. It was fun to kind of play chase. And I was noticing that as I worked my way up the field, I was getting to like increasingly nicer bikes. So it was first the crappy road bikes, then the decent road bikes, then the road bikes with aero bars, then like, oh, there's a tri bike up there. And then I remember I passed somebody probably about 30 miles in who had a nice tri bike and an aero helmet. And I was like, okay, awesome. Like, we have made it to some type of moderate in the field. So again, not going to judge everyone based on their gear, but it felt good to at least get to that point. And I mean, looking down at my data, my power was really good. My heart was really good. I was fueling well. I was hydrating well. So at that point, I mean, the numbers said that I was racing as I should have been, and that felt really good. So I think that also kind of propelled me forward and kept me feeling pretty strong.
That's super cool. Yeah, for anyone who's ever done a Ragnar race, one of the relay races, they have a concept of kills, and all the teams keep track of kills when you pass another team. And I've just like like we would have a van and like tally up all of them. I just picture you going by all these people and just like taking tally marks of all the different kills. So it's actually like so fun. It sounds kind of aggressive and competitive, but it's really fun to tap into that sometimes. And I love that you were able to do that.
I love that. And honestly, I did have a thought. I was like, maybe I should be counting how many people I passed. Like, that could be something cool to do.
I mean, you probably had like 135 kills. So
that was kind of cool. Yeah. So anyway, like kept going. That felt really good. I had some good bottle handoffs with Connor. He was crushing the crewing. That was going really, really well. And I was moving up. And then I got to, I would say, the halfway point of the bike. And at that point, I'd like mentally recovered completely from getting lost. I was like, whatever, that's fine. I'm going to subtract 20 minutes from my total time and tell myself that was what I did. And then I looked down and I was like, what's wrong with my left aero bar? And it looked a little bit bent. And I went to bend it back into place. Like that's never happened to me before. And I heard the metal clatter of a piece falling onto the ground. I was biking probably 25 miles an hour on like a slight downhill. And I was like, uh-oh, we just lost a part of our bike. And from that point, my left aero bar was literally wiggling around like a loose tooth for the rest of the ride. And the only way that I could keep it from just dangling off the bike was if I held it in place in aero on my left hand, resting it against my bike computer in a very specific position, like an isometric hold of my left side.
Oh my gosh.
So that was crazy too. Again, I've never had that type of mechanical. I have no idea what happened. I didn't know how to fix it. If I did fix it, I was trying to sort of feel around and see like, is there a screw? I was like, maybe I have a bike tool that could fix this in the car, but I hadn't prepared for this because I didn't know it was a thing that could happen. My bike's usually like, I've had flat tires before, but really nothing else. And so at that point I was like, well, I guess this is more incentive to stay in aero the entire time because we need to in order to keep our aero bar from dangling in the wind. So again, roll with the punches. And
yeah.
I will say, actually, you are allowed to basically do whatever you want in this race, and you can keep a second bike on your porter's car if you want to. So I'd actually put my road bike there because I was like, if I have a catastrophic mechanical that I can't fix, I could switch to my road bike. But I still actually could ride the tri bike. It was just having a little bit of an issue. So again, like I really was just like, okay, well, we're going to do this as long as we can. And if we have to pivot down the line, that's fine. I think I shouted to Connor one time when I passed him, my aero bars are totally broken. But I didn't ask for anything. So he just kept going and was wondering if I was ever going to ask for my other bike, but it didn't happen. And luckily the bike did make it through. My left shoulder was killing me by the end of the ride because I was just squeezing so tight. And I often get some tightness there, but did make it through the bike, which was so crazy.
Man, look at you just handling things left and right. It's funny because it does make it seem more fun in a way too. It's like, oh, I'm just handling these things that are going wrong. And I know it's not like the perfect race experience, but you learn so much from these things, and just the way you handle it, I think should just be such a confidence boost in what you've trained for mentally and physically is just, it's super cool. Okay, so you finally make it on the bike after a saga. What was the situation then? Did you know where you were? What were you thinking going to the run?
Yeah, so I finished up the bike, and I will say actually the last 4 miles or so of the bike are a really hard part of the course. You have to climb almost 1,500 feet up to Wildcat, which is a really, really big climb. And it was starting to get hot. And honestly, it was kind of demoralizing to have passed 91 miles, which is how long I had bargained for on this bike. And know that I mean, maybe I was 4 miles behind. I didn't even know how far behind I was, but ultimately I had lost about 4.5 miles. So I had to make it to 95.5 to get to the end of this bike. So I was a little bit in the pain cave just in that point. But the great thing is when you get to T2, it feels so good to get off the bike that often I feel like there's a little bit of a second win there. And in my head, I was like, well, I don't know where I am off the field. I didn't really want Connor to tell me, and he didn't, which was great. He read my energy very well by not telling me where I was in contention, because I learned later that I was actually in 6th place at that point. And like, yes, that was decent for making my way up the entire field, but I had gone at this race thinking maybe I could be in podium contention. So I didn't really want to know. But anyway, I was like, you know what I can control? I can do a really, really fast transition right here. And a couple of funny stories I will tell you about that is the transition area was just in the parking lot of Wildcat, a ski area. And there were a couple things that you had to do in order to move through transition. I guess the main thing was you needed to check in with a medical person there, and they needed to like give you a once over and be like, are you actually good to continue? Are you mentally and physically well? Because a lot of people get off the bike and they are like maybe a little dehydrated or underfueled or something. And so I was like, all right, I'm going to make it through there as fast as I possibly can. And so I basically jogged right past them, and you needed to give them your name, your number, and like, are you okay? And I just said, Katie Clayton, 18, feeling amazing, and just kept running. And maybe I wasn't feeling amazing, but I was not really trying to have a conversation in TT right here. And then the second funny thing that happened was I kind of had to pee. I hadn't peed for the entire 5 hours of this bike.
And you had been hydrating well.
And I'd been hydrating and fueling really well. I'd taken down 4 bottles, maybe 4.5 bottles. And also I have not yet mastered the art of peeing on the bike, although I did consider it. It just didn't happen.
Is that something that people do?
Oh my God, yeah. In Ironman, people just, I mean, I think maybe like men do it a little bit more, but I've never been able to just do that. And it also like is really gross. So
yeah, okay.
So anyway, I was like, oh, I really have to pee, but there weren't like porta potties anywhere. So you were going to have to go all the way inside of the ski lodge, downstairs to their basement. And I was like, that's going to be a 5-minute detour. So I was like, Connor, I need you to make me a house out of 2 car doors, and I'm just going to pee in this parking lot. So I did that. It took me literally 20 seconds, and then I was out and on my way. So really proud of my fast transition. I was only in the transition area, I think it was for under 3 minutes, which was pretty good for that distance of a race, putting my trail running pack on, kit off, kit, like this whole experience.
That's incredible. Yeah.
Yeah. So I came out of the transition area, and I was actually came out of there with one woman who I dropped pretty much right away. And I was like, okay, that's good. I'll drop any woman who I can. That's going to feel good anytime it can happen. But I'm telling you, I was not thinking about any type of podium winning, no outcome here. I was just like, let's just do this cool run hike up Mount Washington. I love the whites. This is going to be really fun.
Mm-hmm. Okay, amazing. Also, I just love that you did a car door pee. And if anyone in the audience has not mastered a car door pee, highly recommend.
Thank you. I didn't even know that it was like a named thing, a car door pee, but I love it. It's so good.
Yeah, it's the best. I do it all the time. Okay, so you are rocking it now. So now you're in 5th, right? But you don't know it. You just...
Yeah, no idea where I was, but I knew that I just passed a woman out, so I guess I had moved into 5th by that point. And the first part of the run, you go up the road, actually, so it's almost a mile of road running slightly uphill, and then you turn onto the trail, and it's immediately straight uphill. And you can jog a little bit, but a lot of it's kind of power hiking. And so I'm working up the trail. I had practiced this in a race sim, and I have done this trail probably 10 times in my life before. So I knew exactly what to expect, which I'll say was a huge advantage. I knew what kind of terrain it was going to be, and I didn't have to think about navigation. I didn't have to think about anything new besides like, okay, this is something that I'm really comfortable with. And so I'm working up the trail, and then I saw another woman, and I was like, okay, cool, passing someone else. And then I saw another woman, and I ended up passing, I think I passed 3 women on the lower part of the trail, which I had no idea at the time, but that actually moved me into 2nd place going up the trail. But again, I wasn't thinking about it. I would say I had a little jolt of energy every time I passed someone, because I was like, okay, that's one more place that I'm moving up. Like, that's cool. I'm happy about that. But it was a quick thing where I'd say nice job, she'd say often nice job, and then I just keep going. And I really was like, we're not thinking about this right now. We're not thinking about winning. I thought there were probably still 5-10 women ahead of me. And so then there's a shelter called Hermit Lake, which is right before you go up into the steepest part of the Tuckerman Ravine climb. And there's also a check-in where you're supposed to give them your name and your number and how you're doing. Similarly there, I sprinted through it because it was like those one flat section. I gave them like a Katie Clayton 18, amazing, and just kept going.
I love that. You gotta use that. That's gonna be a mantra or something.
Yeah, yeah. But they got my number and then kept going. And yeah, and I mean, I was working hard, but I felt very calm in the whole thing because honestly, this was just so familiar. And I just kept telling myself this race was made special order for me. An uphill trail run in the whites. I've done this so many times. I've been training for this literally for my entire life with just the mountain adventuring that I've been doing. And it felt cool. I felt very one with the trail in that it was pretty hot at times and there were all these streams everywhere. And I would just like dunk my hat in a stream and throw it back on and be like, this is an aid station. And just kept nailing my fueling, kept nailing everything as best I could. And then kept climbing. And the last mile and a half of this trail, even just the last mile, is so brutal. It's like 1,700 feet of climbing. And it moves from efficient power hiking into like single-legged squat bouldering over and over again for 45 minutes or something. And so it was hard, but I also knew like, no, this is my terrain. This is what I've trained for. I've done a ton of practicing on this terrain. I've done a lot of strength training that has prepared me specifically to do this. So it was very, very manageable, I would say. And then finally, you reach what's called the Summit Cone, which is this last basically like huge rock pile getting to the very top of Mount Washington. And about halfway up the cone, I saw what looked like another woman. And honestly, my first thought was like, wow, good for her. Nice race. I'm not going to catch her. Like, she's way up there. So I just kept moving, kept going my pace. But the truth is that me moving at my pace and her moving at her pace, I was getting closer and closer and closer and closer. And before I knew it, I was basically right behind her with maybe a quarter mile to go and 300 to 500 feet of elevation. That actually takes a little while for that much elevation. Like a quarter mile sounds short, but it's not. That's still actually quite a ways. But I was like, all right, I'm just going to go around her because if I keep my current pace right now, I'm going to be ahead of her. And again, did not think that she was in first. I just thought that she was doing well, but she was really nice. So we said, nice job. I kept moving and I did not look back. I just kept going from that point. And then finally, I got towards the top and there's sort of a landing right before you get onto the very ending, which is a set of stairs that takes you to the summit. So right before the stairs, there were a lot of tourists who were actually sitting and watching the racers come up. And there was this one guy there, he was not affiliated with the race, but he said, are you in a relay? And so this race has some relays. And I said, no. And he said, I think you're first woman. And in my head, I was like, there's no way. Like, this random guy has no idea what he's talking about. Probably another woman kind of went by 30 minutes ago. He has no idea that it doesn't matter. And I was like, we're not going to think about that right now. But what I did know was that there was nobody behind me. I took a glance back. There was no one really ahead of me. And so I didn't need to like sprint or anything. So I basically just power hiked up the stairs and jogged it in. And I saw my parents were there and I saw Connor and they're cheering. And I walked right up to the finish line or jogged there, which is this table. And I touched the table and the race director turned to me and he goes, congratulations, you're a female overall winner. And I swear my jaw dropped on the floor. I did not believe it until he actually told me. My parents and Connor had no idea because they'd only gone up there a little bit ago. And so I turned to them and I said, I just won. And they were totally floored. They had actually seen another woman finish, but she was part of a relay, so it didn't count. And yeah, and then I also later found out that I'd actually set the course record for the run. And that's kind of crazy, not something that I would have expected. But yeah, eventually beat second place by about 3 minutes. And then it was really tight. It was like second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth were all within 10 minutes of each other. And I'm telling you right now, like, I can't believe that this happened. It's just like a wild kind of story. And I'm still letting it sink in, but it was pretty cool.
This is the most incredible story. I was getting emotional when you were telling that story. It's like one of the best. It's like, this is why we love sports, right? Like these surprise moments, these underdogs, just the belief paying off and everything that you've worked for and like having it all come together is just so amazing. And I'm like, okay, now we got to get you into trail running because you're one with the trail and no one runs the whites like you. So
I will say I did have this mantra that I kind of came up with as I was going up the trail. And I just kept saying, no one runs the whites off the bike like Katie Clayton. And again, I will not claim to be the best trail runner out there, but for this very specialized thing, which is biking 95 miles as fast as you can and then running up a big hill, I was like, this is for me. Like, this race is special design for me. And I mean, everyone out there did so well and super impressed with them. But I think I have just been training for this forever. Just by doing Adventures in the White Mountains is how I got so prepared for a race like this. And it was like, here I am in my backyard. Let's have a fun day. And it worked.
Oh, so amazing. So amazing. I just like the biggest congratulations. Just sit in it and absorb it because this is like one of the best race stories I've ever heard. So I'm psyched for you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Well, okay. Now it's your day after the race. You've had a little bit of time to process the initial shock. What do you think you're taking from this race into your future? What did you learn from this experience?
So I'm sure that I will probably collect more insights just as I like continue to process and let it sink in. But a few things that stood out to me that I've been thinking about in the last day or two. First thing, like, winning is cool. I have a cool plaque. I got some fun winter goggles and a towel and some other stuff like that. But honestly, I am so much more proud of just the mindset that I had because I know that it would have been really easy to quit. And many other times I would have probably quit. And if I hadn't done all those things to make it just about me and what I wanted, I probably would have quit. If I thought that I was out of contention that early and I thought the only thing that mattered was winning, I would have been like, no, this isn't worth it. This is not my day. So that was a big one. I think the second thing that really stood out was it's really important to focus on process goals over outcome goals in general. And I think in retrospect, I'm glad that I got lost because I think it forced me, like any lingering bit of outcome goals that were kind of holding over from the week, even though I'd worked hard to dismantle them, they were not there anymore. So it was just about process. And what's nice is if you focus on process goals, I think you often achieve outcomes as a result. We've talked about that a lot. I mean, that's exactly like your Canyons race to a T, is just focus on you, focus on the process. And I think that stood out. The third one here, I would say emotional regulation is a powerful drug. And so being able to say like, okay, yeah, I'm frustrated that I got lost, but that is not serving me to be frustrated. Like if I'm going to use some anger to channel into like biking fast to join the crowd, sure, that's fine. But we cannot be like, you suck. Why did you make that stupid decision? Why didn't you take the right turn? All of that, it just doesn't really serve you. So it was cool to just be able to reset, and excited to keep working on that one for life skills. Number 4 was everyone should cultivate their own performance bubble. So I just give so much credit to that team for getting me to the starting line and to the finish line. And it helps so much to know that no one cared if I won or not, and no one even really cared if I did the race. They just wanted what was best for me. And I think ultimately it was best for me to do the race, but I felt no pressure from that bubble. So that was really special. And then last thing here, 3 subpoints. There are some cliches that I think do kind of apply to this race that are pretty true. Number 1, you can be down, but never out of the fight. So I was 20 plus minutes down and it actually was not over. So you just have to keep giving it your all. Number 2, don't give up. It would have been really easy to give up or quit, and I didn't. And number 3, to believe in yourself. And yeah, coming up that trail and just saying, no one runs the whites off the bike like Katie Clayton runs the whites off the bike. That was something that I think got me all the way to the finish line without even feeling like I went, like I wasn't redlining. I was just calm and confident and felt pretty good. So
that's amazing. Yeah. Belief is so powerful. I love that. Just everyone to believe in yourself and also not count yourself out is just a very powerful lesson that you just shared with all of us. So thank you for doing that. That's awesome. Well, this has been an incredible race summary. Seriously, this story is just, it's amazing. So I'm so glad I got to catch up with you literally live and hear all about this, because when you shared with me that you won this race, I was also shocked, because the last I had heard, you were not feeling so great and thinking about maybe I just want to approach it with no goals, but I'm just going to not try to focus on going that hard and pushing myself. And that completely changed. I just love that for you. So yeah, exciting.
Thank you. Yeah. And I will note, actually, I don't think that I am at full capacity right now. I know I need to get my iron levels up, and I know that I need to figure out some of this health stuff, and I am looking forward to taking a break in order to do that. But I think it actually makes me a little bit excited, where I'm like, oh, if this is me with low ferritin, then what would it be like if I actually just got back to baseline? And so I'm excited for next season. I don't know what that will be like. I would say one thought did cross my mind of like, how would I do at Cedar Summit if I actually just biked 91 miles? Like, maybe I would go 20 to 30 minutes faster. That would be cool.
Clearly you would have. You lost 20 minutes. So
yeah, so that's something that's on my radar. I'm super intrigued by trail running. I loved the run training for this so much. So that's on my mind. But yeah, I mean, I think the performance bubble and myself, everybody's like, we need to take a little bit of a break right now. And so I'm really excited to like full steam ahead on recovery and making sure that I feel super solid, super healthy, physically, mentally, as I approach my next kind of season. But yeah, thanks for listening to it. And also want to say thank you to like everyone who reached out, either saying congratulations or before the race or whatever it was. I really felt a lot of love and support from our community. And that really means the world, especially because I know it's not necessarily contingent on me winning the race, even though it was pretty fun to have that happen.
Yeah. Oh, it's amazing. And I actually have one last question then, just based on this. So you talk about the recovery that you're looking forward to leaning into. What do you think that tactically like the next few weeks look like for you?
Yeah, so I think for me, I'm gonna, first of all, I don't need to do doubles for any reason for the next several months. I'm always doing doubles to get ready for these big races. So that's a really easy one to make sure I'm cutting volume. I think I definitely need to have multiple rest days per week, maybe 2 rest days a week. I'll probably see how I'm feeling kind of day in, day out. But again, more rest than I was taking previously. I think usually I approach recovery with just active recovery for a couple weeks after a race. So like easy swimming without a watch or easy spinning. That's probably something that I'll do, but I'm not very methodical about planning out what it's going to be. It's really going by feel. And I think not doing intensity for a little while as well. So all those things together, I'm hopeful will kind of get me where I want to be. And I think maybe also taking breaks from Strava sometimes more often, or just put the really cool stuff on. Like, I don't know that everyone needs to see like lunch swim 15 yards or whatever. And I think that was good for my mindset as well. So that'll be good. And yeah, just really investing and giving back to the people in the performance bubble, giving back to people that I love. I've got some family travel going on and not trying to say like, oh, I'm going to bring my bike and put it in a rental car and make all this happen. It's like, let's just embrace the fact that we're going to go for a 45-minute walk as a family. And that's what's going on.
Great stuff. Okay. Well, a lot to look forward to. Big congrats, but super exciting for the endurance drive. And we love cheering you on.
Thank you so much, Elena. You're the best.
Yeah.
All right. Well, with that, should we end with gear pick of the week?
We got to end with gear pick of the week, but mine is now kind of irrelevant because we already talked about it.
No, I love yours. You should do it anyway. Please share your gear pick of the week.
So we were talking at the very beginning about Katie's iron, and she had mentioned that she took my advice with Quest Diagnostics. And I have, for another episode, I'm going through my own health journey right now. And I am just reminding people that I am a big fan of Quest Diagnostics, mainly because you can just be in control of your own health. And it's still helpful, obviously, to have a PCP that you trust. But sometimes the process of going to a PCP, having to get test ordered, going to get the test, and then having to deal with insurance that sometimes will charge actually more than Quest Diagnostics charges me for simple tests like getting my ferritin checked. It's simpler for me to just pay out of pocket the $60 to get this test. And as I've had a few more tests to get done, it's been really helpful for me to know that I can just go get quick answers. So that's been a very useful tool. It can't do everything, but just for people that want some control over their health and can read some of the results and all that stuff, I would recommend looking at it as an option.
Yes, +1 on Quest Diagnostics, and also on learning a little bit about, like, I've done a really deep dive on ferritin in the last couple of weeks because I experienced this, and knowing how to actually read some of those labs, you can educate yourself. So knowing at least how to interpret some of these values and understand some of the symptoms, I think is really empowering from a health perspective. And there is a lot of good information out there. And if you don't know, you can ask us about iron because we know a lot about iron at this point.
We know too much about iron at this point.
Awesome. Okay. And then my gear pick of the week, I can't believe I haven't mentioned this as an official gear pick of the week yet, but I'm sharing my go-to carb mix. This got me through Sea to Summit. So I really like Scratch Super Fuel. And it's awesome because you can get like up to 100 grams of carbs in a bottle. I usually actually split it and go for 50 to 60 a bottle, but that's a really easy way to nail 70 to 90 grams of carbs per hour. You just do a bottle per hour and a little bit of like, I'll do a Nature's Bakery fig bar, I'll do a gel on the side. And I'll usually mix it with Element as well to get a little bit of that extra sodium. And my favorite thing about it is it doesn't taste super sweet. Like it goes down really light. And so it just feels like you're drinking slightly lemon limey water, but you're actually smashing 60 grams of carbs in a bottle. So big fan of that. And that got me through Sea to Summit. So if you have this, maybe you will have a big comeback too.
Nice. Love it. Okay. Well, incredible episode as always to hear from our expert Katie on her wonderful race. But yeah, looking forward to more chats soon now that we're back and hopefully having a more normal rest of the year.
Yes, we are looking forward to it. And podcast listeners, we love you. Please give us a rating or review if you have a chance. And thank you so much for listening.